Hi, it's Cliff Sewell. Welcome to the Magical Mindset Podcast. For those of you who do follow the podcast, you'll know my story around alcohol and addiction and how I've come the other side. My guest today is a gentleman who speaks very, very openly, very bluntly about the real challenges of alcohol and drug addiction. He's a good friend of mine now. He really helped me right at the very start of my journey. So it's a real honor for me to have him on the podcast today, telling his story. And I know it will really resonate with a lot of people out there. My guest today is Tom, and I really look forward to having a really good conversation with him.
The alarm bell should have been ringing for people at 13. When I'm in a nightclub, getting involved in a massive punch-up, I could always justify my drinking because I had a job. I had a company car, I had a decent salary. I was in charge of people on a building site. I was a manager. I couldn't be an alcoholic. When you get sober, everything is sunshine and rainbows. And it's not. If you focus on what you need, you'll get what you want. If you focus on what you want, you'll never get what you need.
Tom and I, we've known each other for 7 years, but we knew each other before then because our first connection came. I was sat, I can literally still, you know when you can remember something really clearly? I can remember being sat at my desk at work and I picked up a Yorkshire Post newspaper and I read an article about this madman who had ran across America. And then the article really snapped my attention because it ran across America to highlight and promote and talk about alcoholism and sobriety. And we're going to talk about that. But I knew I had a drink problem at the point, and I probably was at my peak of drinking there, really proper drinking, as I called it. And it was that moment when, if I'd not seen that Yorkshire Post, I don't know where I would have found the inspiration, because I found it. I found you. I rang you, and we had many meetings. And you were phenomenally supportive. Never wanted anything from me. Incredibly supportive, and there's no doubt about it. You got me on the road to recovery.
That's good to hear, Cliff.
There's no ifs or buts. I'm not just being nice because you happen to be on the podcast. It was you, and by talking to you and working with you and spending time with you at a random garden centre just off the M62 or M1. M1, wasn't it? And then almost finding Rich Rowell podcasts as well about sobriety.
Yeah.
That got me on my journey.
That's fantastic to hear.
And for those, this is not about me. I will let you talk. But I want to make a point, because if anybody's listening to this who is right at the start, or in drinking, or right at the start of considering sobriety, and you don't think you're ever going to get there, what I will say to you is that at that point, I was never sure I was ever going to get it. But I refused to give in, and through help, through talking to people like you and help and going through, here I am, 5 years later, sat in a podcasting studio with my own podcast, talking about health, mindset, motivation, sobriety. If somebody had told me that on that day when I rang you, I would have never believed them. So if you are just on that journey, it's possible. That's enough about me, Tom. Let's start with, tell us a story. We always like people to start young. Tell us the childhood and stuff like that, and we'll delve into all sorts of things, I think.
Okay, yeah. All right, my childhood is a little bit unique in the fact that grew up through the Troubles in Belfast. I was born in Belfast during probably the most tumultuous time in the north of Ireland's history. 1974, I was born in a little place called Glengormley, which is just north of the city of Belfast. And growing up through the Troubles, did it shape me as a young man? Yes, it did. It was...
what effect did it have on you?
Well, I think for me, it was you were constantly in fear.
Right.
Constantly in fear. And I only know this, 40 years later, that our childhoods weren't normal. When you're walking down to school and there's a soldier pointing a gun at you, while you're in your school uniform. That's not a normal childhood. When you're running through housing estates, trying to get to your Catholic school through a Protestant housing estate, having to zip up your coat in case a Protestant sees you, and it was the same, it was reciprocal, it was the same the other way around. That's not normal. When you were waiting for your mother or father to come home and they were late, you didn't know whether they were caught up in a bomb scare or a bombing or a shooting or a riot. So you were constantly in a state of fear. And for me, I had the additional issues where my father was struggling. My father was a drug addict. Through the troubles, he used drugs to get himself, I suppose, to escape the fear
Mhm.
and the anxiety around living in Belfast. And drugs were his thing. So we had that to deal with as well.
So, as a youngster, this may be a bizarre comment because a lot of people, with the greatest respect, that's completely alien to them that their parent would be a drug addict. And I know there are a lot. I'm not. I don't live in that much of a bubble. But even as a youngster, were you openly aware that your parent, your father, was a drug addict, and it was
I didn't know what drug addict meant,
right?
but I knew he was a drug addict because one of my earliest memories has been taken into the bedroom and told my dad was going to rehab. I would have been 8 at the
Right.
time, 7 or 8. One of my when I say my earliest memories, I can remember other stuff, but one of the most vivid memories has been sitting in the room with my siblings, being told that my dad was going into a rehab facility. Didn't know what a rehab facility was. Um, Very vague recollections of going to visit him in what um, I suppose in my head was a madhouse.
Right.
That's what it
Is that
looked
what
like.
you saw it as then? Yeah.
The people were strange. They were looking strange. They weren't normal. So for me as a child, very frightening. Um, but that was normal for us. Frightening was normal. If you have a drug addict coming home on a night time, not very happy with life, violence isn't far behind. So there was violence on the streets and violence in my home, and it was tough, Cliff. It was tough. It was a tough place to be. Um,
Violence at home towards you.
Towards all of us,
Right.
we all suffered. Mom, brothers and sisters, we all suffered. Me and my eldest sister probably suffered the most. Um, but yeah, it was tough. It was a tough. I tried to laugh it off as a in my 20s as he was a man of his time.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because the 70s and 80s, dads were pretty rough. But then I spoke to an old school friend of mine and I said to him, "How did you cope with the beatings?" And he says, "What beatings, Tom? My dad never touched us." And it was at that moment I realized that, yeah, my childhood wasn't normal.
Right.
There was things about my childhood that weren't normal, that I thought were normal. Um, he was unemployed then. He was unemployed for 4 years. He lost his job because of his drug addiction. And after 4 years, he decided he was going to move us to this fantastic new place, Wakefield, West Yorkshire.
Right.
Why the hell would we move to Wakefield? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're thinking of a fantastic new place, I'm thinking Barbados, Sydney, Australia, Disneyland, but no, Wakefield.
Why? Why?
So they were both mental health nurses, my mum
Right.
and dad, and Stanley Royd Hospital was still open. So they made a decision that we're going to come and work at Stanley Royd Hospital. So Wakefield was chosen, and this is before the internet, so I didn't know anything about Wakefield. I just thought, I don't want to come to England. Why would I go to England? It's a strange place. I hate English. I'll be honest with you, I'm Irish lad. I hated the English. Any Englishman I'd ever met had a uniform on and pointed a gun at us. So for me, no, I don't want to come here.
I have got to, and with a smile on my face, you're we've got to be careful of the word hatred of English, but because we do know each other, I chuckle to myself when there's any type of football tournament on,
Oh yeah,
where
100%.
I look at Tom's Facebook and it changes the the profile picture changes to whichever flag
Yeah.
it is that England are playing next.
Well,
And I'm not. That's genuine. What happens, isn't it?
yeah, 100%. I mean, it's the 32 team World Cup. I've got 31 chances to win.
Yeah.
Anyone but England, I think Andy Murray once said.
Mhm.
And what a true, there was never a truer word said. And that obviously, people might be listening going, well, you're still staying here. I get that. but that's only because Britain still owns my little bit. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Okay.
And let's not get too political, but I do enjoy the banter of the England thing. And you know, my lad played rugby league for Ireland, and he was talking about England. And I says, look, if you play for England at rugby league at 19, your mum will take you. I'm not taking you. I won't be
Are
taking
you
you.
serious or are you joking
No,
now?
I'm serious. I wouldn't have taken him to England. He played for Ireland. I was very proud that he played for Ireland. He played a test match in Dublin and he played in Wales. Only twice he played for them. One of the proudest moments a father can ever have, especially an immigrant father, somebody who's come over here, had a tough time, Cliff, when I came over here. And that probably goes to why there is so much animosity towards England. I wasn't welcome with open arms when I came here. You know, we weren't given the red carpet treatment. Anytime a bomb went off and a British soldier got injured, blame the Irish kid. Anytime, you know, I answered a question in the classroom with my stupid accent, I was either laughed at or punched.
Right.
So, you know, I once got punched in the face for the Harrods bomb, that which was in 1982, I believe. I was 8,
Right.
and a kid came up and punched me straight in the face in the middle of an English class. I was like, what's that for? And my mum was in Harrods that day. Says, I was in Belfast, nothing to do with me. So the animosity part comes from being brutalized when I came over here.
Right.
And I use that word with brutalized as in I lived in fear sometimes of how I was going to get through the day. I couldn't speak for many years in my teenage years. I just didn't want to speak. I didn't want to talk. This streetwise Belfast kid who came over here, and I could look after myself, complete shell of myself after 6 months living in this country. So the animosity still is there, but there's a background to it. It's not just I've decided I don't like England, and I love England. I've been in Yorkshire now for 39 years. You know what I mean? So I'm probably an honorary Yorkshireman, never English though.
Yep.
Honorary Yorkshire. But yeah, there is a bit of that, and it wasn't the red carpet, and it wasn't the best of starts living in England because when we did come over, my father died.
Right.
He died 2 years after we got here. So my father drank a bottle of whiskey one night. He wasn't a drinker. Only drunk once in his life, to my knowledge. Certainly, as a father, I never saw him drinking. He wore the Pioneer's Pledge badge of the Catholic Church. But one night he was having a bad day. Drunk a bottle of whiskey, staggered upstairs to bed, vomited and choked to death.
I never knew that story.
39 years of age, 5 kids. Um,
So all the years of drug abuse, and it was one bottle of
it was
whiskey.
alcohol that killed him. Alcohol that killed him.
Right.
Death by misadventure, I think it was put down as, but yeah, it was alcohol. And for me, that was probably the start of my problems. I was dealing with the racism and the abuse I was taking on a day-to-day basis, and then I was dealing with growing up in a country without my dad.
Mhm.
And whether he was a good dad or a bad dad is irrelevant. He was my dad, and at 13 years of age, you need a dad, or you need some sort of male role model. My mother, God bless her, did her best, did everything she could, refused to take us back to Belfast because she knew I was ripe for the picking when it came to getting involved in activities I shouldn't have been getting involved with. So she kept me in England. But she was broken. You know, she lost her husband of 19 years.
Right.
She was broken. She couldn't look after a teenage boy. So I was literally left to run wild, which I did. I grabbed it with every opportunity I could.
Talk us through that, because alcohol became an incredibly toxic part of your life, didn't it?
Yeah. But it also became something that was a tool for success. So a few months after Dad died, I went on a football trip to Germany. Love football, you know, goalkeeper. That was my salvation. And on that trip, the under-16s were going into a pub, and I followed them in because alcohol wouldn't kill me.
Mhm.
So I was better than my dad.
Right.
Ordered my first pint of German beer. Hey up, Tom's having a drink. Tom, not Paddy or Mick or the Irish kid. Hold on here, they're actually talking to me. And after 2 or 3 pints of German beer, I've got a bit of confidence. Thinking, this is all right. Um, I was more myself. I was relaxed. I was able to chat. I was able to bring out the true person that was inside. I'd been damaged through the racism, through all that bullying, through losing my dad, all that sadness. All that sadness had gone within the space of 3 pints of German lager. And it was a revelation.
Right.
It was like, why has nobody told me about this?
Can you still clearly
Yeah,
remember it as
why has
that?
nobody told me about this? This is phenomenal. This is the best night of my life. I've never experienced anything like it. It was phenomenal. So when I came back to England, that's what I did. 2 cans of lager before I went to school in the morning. Off license, weren't as strict on ID back then. And being an Irishman, I had a beer at the age of 10. At lunchtime, 4 cans of lager in the park. It wasn't every day, but it was a lot of the time. That was my normal behaviour. And then they used to have a thing in Wakefield called 10 pence a pint night, rooftop gardens. Monday night, 10 pence a pint, fiver in, and literally 10 pence a pint. And that was like a whole new world opened up to me. 13 years of age, I'm in a nightclub with adults drinking 10 pence a pint lager, which wasn't great, but it was at that age, I was thinking this is phenomenal. Getting into fights, chatting up girls, and just generally being lawless. The first night out involved a massive bar brawl, which I thrived in. I thought, this is phenomenal. This whole buzz of drinking, drink, music, women, fighting. What more does a young boy who's angry, frustrated, being bullied, with a dead father need? This is it. And it was phenomenal. And from then on, I let 13 years of age till 33, alcohol completely destroyed my life.
How did you not survive, but how did you function? So you go through that and then you get to your 16, 17, 18, you live in school, you've got to get a job, you've got to have proper relationships with other people.
Yeah.
How did you manage?
So I left school at 14, unofficially. Went to work on a building site. Followed my culture, the culture of the Irish back then.
Yeah.
We worked on building sites. But the thing about the building sites, you could get away with the stuff we were doing. You could drink like an absolute monster as long as you turned up for work the next morning. Didn't matter if you're hungover. Didn't matter if you're vomiting in the trench or, we're feeling a bit, you'd sweat it out of you. If the foreman saw me hungover at 14, he'd put me on the jackhammer, banging out some concrete for 4 hours to sweat it out of me. It would almost be encouraged. Look, that's just the way we are. We drink hard and we work hard. So at 14, I had that schooling. Don't get me wrong, those men were very influential in my life for the work ethic. But there was also one or two of them were very influential in the drinking ethics as well. It was very much a cultural thing. That's just how we did it. So the construction industry for me was almost like utopia when it came to drinking. Our bosses were drink driving every day. We were, fighting in pubs and clubs everywhere we went. We were absolute lunatics. But it wasn't unusual for us to be like that. Everyone was like that. We were all just wild men. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. In my, I knew there was some things wrong, but I still loved it. I loved going out into town on a Saturday night with my wages and getting absolutely blind, blackout drunk and waking up on a Sunday morning not knowing where I was, possibly with a woman, possibly in a mate's flat, possibly in a ditch. I actively enjoyed that, possibly in a jail cell, and that happened quite frequently. And I was uncontrollable. My mother would make 2 phone calls in the morning on Saturday. She would ring Pinderfields or she'd ring Wood Street Police Station
Right.
because she knew I'd be in one or the other. And
Who's that bad?
I was usually in Wood Street.
Right.
Um, and it was back in the days when they would lock you up and then just throw you out the next morning.
Mhm.
There was none of this, you might have got taken to court and have a bind over for a year or whatever else, but it was never, they usually just threw you out. So, but I was lawless. And I tried to escape as well. I went off to Australia at the age of 20. because it was getting bad. I was getting involved in so much stuff. My violence was getting worse. I was getting angrier. The booze allowed you to do that. You see, the booze allowed you to be, I always say, it allowed me to be my dad,
Mhm.
which is not a place I wanted to be looking back. But at the time, it's what I knew best. And the booze allowed me to do that. And I tried to escape, went off to Australia. Had a great time, 1995, moved to Sydney. Phenomenal part of my life. 3 months didn't drink, worked hard. Second 3 months, drunk like a fish, acting like Rockefeller. Came back with 50 quid in my pocket.
Right.
You know, just complete waste of my time. Didn't solve anything. If anything, it made me worse. If anything, it made me a better drinker. So yeah, so trying to escape it, and especially for young people who are listening to this, you think that it's always going to be as good as that. You think that it's always going to be good. It's always going to be fun. You look back in your life with rose-tinted glasses. You think about the good parts. At 50 now, I am looking back on it. I'm thinking the alarm bells should have been ringing for people at 13.
Yeah.
When I'm in a nightclub, getting involved in a massive punch-up. If you saw a 13-year-old in a nightclub involved in a massive punch-up, you'd be ringing social services.
Mhm.
So the alarm bells were there, the warning signs were there, and I think there is some frustration from me that nobody grabbed me as a young man. I went, hold on here, what is going on here? What is wrong with you? And it was just the fact that I was bloody angry, Cliff. I was angry that I couldn't fulfill what was in here,
Mhm.
my potential. I had failed at school, no GCSEs, and I knew I was better than that. I'm not a daft lad. I'm somebody who's, when I did get a job, I worked as an assistant quantity surveyor. Maths was my thing. I could do that sort of work. I was good at what I did. I was a quick learner, but I was still frustrated that I was forever going to be just this working class kid who drunk all the time and spent his wages on a week-to-week basis.
Gives us a picture of where it got to. So it's 17 and a half years you've been sober now.
Yep.
How did you do it? What happened? How did you do it?
By the time, so by about 31, when you said at the start about your peak of your drinking, that was probably my peak of my drinking. That was my gold medal standard. That was the time when things were, this is phenomenal. This is either going to kill me or they're going to build a statue of me because I've broken all records for the amount of alcohol you can consume. And I got to a stage when with my partner Zoe, with 2 little ones, and I'd already lost relationships with my 2 older boys because of alcohol. And I could see in Zoe's eyes that, do you know what, she's going to leave here. This isn't going to last. She's going to leave me.
Yeah.
Financially, I was in difficulties. I'd spent all the family money. I'd lost a job because of booze, which had never happened before. I'd never lost a job because of booze. So my excuses were running out. I could always justify my drinking because I had a job. I had a company car. I had a decent salary. I was in charge of people on a building site. I was a manager. I couldn't be an alcoholic. Because alcoholics are homeless,
Sit on the bench in the
jobless,
park. Yeah. Yeah.
violent,
Mhm.
smelly. I wasn't that. I was okay. And then when I lost the job and the money was running out, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, maybe I am. Maybe I'm an alcoholic. No, I am. Definitely, 100%. But then you start asking, where do you go for help? And bear in mind, we'll come back 2007, nearly 20 years ago. Probably 2005 when I first started looking for help. And I went to ask somebody at Turning Point at the time. And this lovely young lady took all my details, spent an hour talking to me. It was phenomenal. I was in floods of tears. It was like a big release of emotion. And she said, right, we'll be in touch. I was like, what are you talking about? You'll be in touch. I need help now. No, it doesn't work like that. We'll see in 3 to 4 weeks. And I went straight out of that office, straight across the road. I had a choice between going to the church or going to the college pub. I went to the college pub. And they lost me for 18 months. I rang my old boss up. He had a contract coming up in Northern Ireland. And I went off to work in Ireland for a year. That was me done. So the financial part was okay then. I managed to pull the wool over Zoe's eyes for another year. It was like, don't worry about it. I've got a good job. Everything's okay. But I was coming home on a Friday night. We were flying over to Ireland on a Monday, flying home on a Friday night. But I was flying home on a Friday night absolutely wrecked because I'd finished work at 12 o'clock and I was in the airport at 2 and my flight wasn't until 7. So every Friday night, poor Zoe was picking me up, absolutely ruined. And I couldn't do it anymore. I'd had enough. So I started to try and get myself well. Decided I'd sign up for a duathlon. It was a men's health magazine.
Mhm.
And I saw this little advert. I'm thinking, it was it was St. Patrick's weekend. And I remember Zoe being particularly angry with me because I'd been on the drink for a week. And I saw this advert and I went, I'm going to do this duathlon. It was in September. Thought that'll get her off my back for 6 months. I'll pretend I'm training for this. And I thought to myself, you know, I don't know if I can do this. But I did. I tried to start running and tried to start doing these things, and it was like, this is ridiculous. I can't do this. This is awful. You know, the first run I did, I came back home and vomited all over the bathroom. And I can't do this. But I started feeling something inside, Cliff, and I've since found out it's called happiness. It was enough to make me go running again and again and again. But sadly for me, as most addicts' mindset, I thought I was better than everyone else. I thought I could control it. So quite quickly it became, I was running a 10K, I run a half marathon. So if I ran a 10K, 6 miles, 6 pints, half marathon, happy days.
Yeah.
And then it got to a stage where Zoe was saying to me, Tom, you've not been running. You've been in the pub for a week. Tom, you've been in the pub for a month. You've not running. You need to stop drinking. You're an alcoholic. So I did. I stopped August 27, 2007. Went through it all again, the pee, the poo, the vomit, the shakes, the shivers, the sweats, all the nonsense that I went through the first time. And I'm not recommending people do that, the detoxing thing, the cold turkey, because it's a disaster. Definitely don't recommend it. But that for me was all I had. And I started to get well again. I started to do more and more runs. I started to feel good about myself.
27th of August, I think you said.
Yeah.
You got sober. 1 week, 2 week, 1 year after then. Was there any point when you were going to drink again?
I don't recall any time in that early years of ever wanting to go back again. I'd got to the stage where I'd had enough. I really had got to the stage where I'd had enough. People get to those stages at different times in their life.
So another question that I don't think I've ever asked you, but people say to me, it happened the other day. A friend of mine was off to Cheltenham, and it's called Cheltenham in Benidorm. They basically go to Benidorm as a group of lads and watch all the Cheltenham races in Benidorm.
Yeah.
So it's a thing I'd never heard of, and it sounds quite fun. And there was somebody else there, and so basically that's going out for 4 days, and you get up in the morning, you drink all day, and whatever. And somebody said to me, and so this only happened recently, and so 5 years ago, and somebody said to me, that must sound horrendous to you. And I looked at him and went, no, absolutely not. I would I go and do it? No. But I'm going to tell you now, I don't immediately go, oh, that sounds horrendous. My immediate thought is, shit, that sounds like a boatload of fun. Because you said to me, I can still remember the early days when drinking was real fun.
Yeah.
And that's my immediate response. I've now worked so hard at it that I will immediately go, it sounds like a load of fun, but the carnage and the breakdown and the everything that comes after that is just not worth it. So I wouldn't get on the plane type thing.
Yeah.
That's why I don't particularly go to pubs, because I will not say, and I don't know what your view, I will not say that I think of going out getting drunk now is horrendous view in my life. Sometimes it sounds like amazing fun. I just won't do it.
I think there is certainly a nostalgic look back on how you remember drinking. But again, it's about taking off the rose tinted glasses, Cliff. And you remember waking up with your partner and looking at their face of disappointment. And even though you've had a great night, you've ruined something. There's a part of them's died inside from whatever was said the night before. And some of that damage is irreparable. It gets to a point where you can't mend those relationships. So the actual the lad culture, I like that. But if we break it down and look at some of those men who are going to do Cheltenham and Benidorm and look at their home lives and look at the destruction it causes and potentially the health implications of it, let's take off the rose-tinted spectacles and go, yes, it sounds great fun, but it's also just about somebody making loads of money out of you.
I still carry, and I work at it, and I'm getting much better at it, I still carry shame for my behaviour in drinking.
Yeah.
Do you acknowledge that? Do you?
All the time, yeah. Shame's one of those things that will probably follow you for the rest of your sobriety, Cliff. Shame is one of those things that I never asked for forgiveness. It's been offered. And I think that's the way it should be. You shouldn't ask for it. It'll be offered. I've had friends contact me from childhood who have said, you're a bit of a bad person to me. But I forgive you because I've see what you've been through. And I appreciate that. My wife has never once asked or offered forgiveness. She just knows that I'm working every day to get rid of that badness that I did by the good things I do on a day-to-day basis.
Maybe an unfair question. If I asked Zoe, does she think Tom would does she ever worry about Tom drinking again? What would she say?
100% no. She doesn't worry.
No, she doesn't.
She doesn't worry.
But does she fear that you would?
No.
Do you?
I wouldn't. I've no worries at all about drinking again. I would never drink again. I know that's a very brave statement to pull out when I've still got hopefully another 20 or 30 years to go.
More,
but I don't know about too many more, Cliff. 20 or 30, I'll be happy with that. 80's enough. But yeah, I've been through a hell of a time over the last 5 years. I never once thought about picking up a drink. And if ever there was a time to pick up a drink, it was in the last 5 years. That to me would have been a perfect opportunity for me to say, alcohol is my solution to this, because the last 5 years have been horrific. And I think 17 and a half years has been good. And people always look at it and go, oh, it must have been smooth sailing. It's been horrific.
Okay, right. So thank you, because you've made that easier for me. Because this is a podcast about motivation and mindset, but it's also reality. I say this all the time. I see people post things and talk about things. I used to drink. I got sober, and sobriety, the life is sunshine and flowers. And I try not to sell a negative story. The reality is, you've got a shitload more hours every week that you're not drunk.
Yeah.
So all those reasons that you did drink, you don't drink away.
Yeah.
And so you have to work so sobriety isn't sunshine and flowers. It's bloody hard work. And I think it's bloody hard work every day. But the benefits outweigh the hard work. Right. So I want to talk about a couple of things. You wrote a book called Not About the Beard. Yeah. That I think you told me there's still some secondhand copies around on Amazon things. But that is a book about, not just about sobriety. This is about you running across America.
That's right.
Literally running across America. And we can't. Why?
I suppose to use explorers, who do Everest because it was there. I did it because I got frustrated, Cliff. I got frustrated because people kept thinking that, as we've just discussed, that when you get sober, everything is sunshine and rainbows. And it's not. And I wanted to try and explain to people that we do recover and we can do amazing things. So the stats are, for every £1 you spend in recovery, you get £4 back,
Right.
four to £5 back. Economics, whether that's true or not, that's the numbers that have been thrown about. And I wanted people to realize that just because you get sober doesn't mean you just have to go back and do a mundane job, and you can actually go off and do amazing things, whatever you wanted to do. Because I firmly believe that alcohol suppresses potential. Suppresses it. Potential doesn't leave. You're born with potential. That's my view. I think we're all born with equal amounts of potential. The difference is that some people have better opportunities. Some people take their opportunities. For me, the potential is still there. So for 20 years, my potential was drowned through alcohol. But once I started getting sober, I started running, and I started taking my opportunities. Firstly, build a gym at the bottom of the garden and start a personal training business. First opportunity I took, potential started to rise. Realized I was a pretty good coach. Started running more and more. I'll do the Marathon des Sables, run across the Sahara Desert, the toughest foot race on earth. 150 miles through the Sahara Desert, did that in 2010. And then, is that where your story finishes? No, because your potential's still growing because you're taking more opportunities. So the opportunity then arose to do something amazing, which for me was running across the United States of America. And I chose America because running across the States is very much like recovery. So when you leave San Francisco, I started in San Francisco, and you leave San Francisco, and for 2 weeks, you get messages off people about, it's fantastic, well done, go crack America. And then after 2 weeks, people go down with their jobs, and they forget about Tom running across America. And that's like addiction. You get sober, and the first week or two, everybody's ringing you up. How are you getting on? Cliff, how's things? Are you all right? Yeah, how are you doing, Tom? Oh, I think it's fantastic. You're sober and up. I'm really proud of you. And then 2 weeks later, you're checking your phone to see if it's broken because nobody rings.
It's true. It's so true.
Because they've gone on with their life. And you realize that you're not the most important person in their life, because the most important person in anyone's life is themselves. And that's not a criticism, that's just life. So, and I realized that was going to be a very symbolic part. And then you get onto Nevada, you get onto what they call the loneliest road in America, the Highway 50. And again, I chose that route because sobriety is the loneliest road you'll ever walk at times. And the loneliest road in America wasn't just one straight 300-mile road. It was in the Great Basin, so it was 16 mountain passes, all over 6,500 feet. There was 4 towns in 400 miles. The cars that were going past 200 an hour went down to 150 a day. There was nothing. It was desolate. It was just me and my thoughts. And that's what addiction's like. Sometimes you're just left day after day after day with your thoughts. And it's about you making an inventory of the things that you've done in your life and squaring it away and speaking to the big fella if you believe in him, and asking him for guidance if you believe in him, or just listening to the earth. And I did get quite spiritual on this run. I used to think of the Native Americans. They always used to talk about Mother Nature and the land, and listen to the land, listen to the water, listen to the wind. I was like, what does that mean? You spend a few weeks on your own in solitude, running across the loneliest road in America, you'll know what they mean.
Mm-hmm.
When you're running across a desert, the earth will look after you. I'm in the middle of the Sahara Desert, in the middle of the Nevada Desert, and over in the distance I see a white horse, and I thought I was hallucinating. I'm like, what's going on here? And this guy rode up to me, cowboy, white hat on him, white horse, got a photograph of it. It's amazing. He said, "Have you got the Lord Jesus Christ in your life?" I'm looking around and thinking, "What's going on here? I'm in the middle of a desert, middle of the loneliest road in America, and I've met a pastor. He was the local pastor,
Right.
and he got off his horse and he prayed for me. I says, when you say the local pastor, how far away is your church? 300 miles that way. That's not local,
Yeah.
but to them it's local.
Yeah.
So the earth looks after you. Further on through the Nevada section, I got quite frustrated and angry and really annoyed with people. I'm thinking, what's going on here? I'm talking to God because you can. I used to talk to God like I'm talking to you now. It was like, because in the desert you can, there's no churches. Going, what have I done? Haven't I suffered enough? I've been in sobriety for a number of years by that stage. Have I not done enough to help people? Why are you making me do this journey? I miss my family. I've got sore knees. I'm tired. I'm sunburnt. I want to go home. And I got quite angry with them. I said, anyway, look, whatever you've got planned, I trust you. And about 5 minutes later, a motorbike pulled up. Harley Davidson rider. Got off the bike. He came up to me and he says, have you got water? Yeah, I've got water. Have you got some food? Yeah, I've got food. So have you got a place to stay tonight? I'm saying, he's a bit rude, this. Why is he asking all these questions? Yeah, I've got a place to stay tonight. He just walked back to his bike, got back on his bike, looked back at me before he rode off and went, good, I'm just making sure you've got what you need.
Right.
I looked up at God and I went, really? You sent a Harley Davidson rider to tell me that? And it was the best lesson I've ever learned. If you focus on what you need, you'll get what you want. If you focus on what you want, you'll never get what you need. So I needed food, water, and shelter to get to my destination. I wanted a Winnebago, 20 pairs of trainers, a Nike sponsorship, Adidas sponsorship, a sports massage every night, a doctor, all these luxuries. What I actually needed was food, water, and shelter. And I'll reiterate it again to anyone who's listening. If you focus on the needs, you'll get what you want. Just really hone in on what you need to get something done. If you want a Lamborghini, yeah, what do you need? Do you actually need a Lamborghini, or do you just need a car to get you from A to B? Focus on your needs and you'll get what you want. And for me, that was like the best thing that could have ever happened so early in the journey, because it was like, yeah, I'm not going to have the big sponsorship. I'm not going to have the 20 pairs of trainers. I'm going to have to just make do. We haven't got a lot of money to do this. We're going to have to eat McDonald's, eat Subway. We're going to have to just bare knuckle it.
But that story you've just told there, that's not just about the run, is it?
No, it's spiritual. It's everything. For me, it's everything in life. A lot of people say, I want to get sober. I want to get sober. I want to stop taking drugs. No, what you need to do is figure out how you can get through one day. You need to figure out the one day bit.
Couple of things, a couple of questions I want to ask because they're important. First of all, what are you doing now?
I work for a large drug and alcohol service in Kirklees.
Looking after, that might be the wrong phrase. That may be a bit.
I'm the community educator, so I'm there to try and change people's perceptions of addiction.
People with addiction?
No, outsiders.
Right, okay.
It's trying to get people to who previously wouldn't come into service because of the stigma attached. Try and break down that stigma. Trying to say to people, look, do you know what? There's so many people dealing with this issue. We shouldn't be living in shame. We're not anonymous. We are out there. We're out loud and proud. I'm an addict. I think everyone should get the right help and treatment. And if we continue to hide in the shadows, we'll never get the right treatment.
Do you still think we've got an alcohol problem?
100%.
Yeah.
Huge. What was it last year? I think it was 10,500 people died from alcohol, just alcohol last year. That's not to do with the liver cancers and all those different cancers. Just alcohol-related illnesses, 10,000 people. If you add the drug deaths in, there's about 16,000 people. When somebody dies in rugby or football, they have a minute's silence. And I love a minute's silence. It's great. But 16,000 people, if you had a minute's silence for every one of them, you'd be silent for 11 days. 11 days silence, Cliff, of people's fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, aunties, uncles who are dying needlessly from a thing that is so badly underfunded.
So I'm sober and I was an alcoholic. So I obviously don't have this opinion. People are listening. People are out there listening, saying 10,000 people. It's their fault.
Yeah.
They shouldn't drink. Nobody forces them to drink.
Yeah.
I used to get angry about that, but I don't anymore.
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
It's similar to you, Cliff. I used to get really annoyed with that, but that's, my answer to that is it's only their only choice was that first drink. If you're an alcoholic and you're dealing with something that causes you to have a substance use issue, all bets are off after the first one. All you've done is take a drink like every other 18-year-old or every other child at 15 when they're out with their mates. You don't know what they've dealt with. So for me as a young person, I was dealing with trauma from the Troubles. I was dealing with trauma from having a drug addict father. I was dealing with trauma from my father dying at 13 when I was 13 years of age. I was dealing with being beaten up and abused for being an Irish kid in England. All that trauma builds up. I didn't choose any of that. I haven't chosen any of that. My solution was to drink myself into oblivion. So the choices weren't there for me. I didn't choose the trauma. I chose the solution. So for anyone who says they choose, no, they chose a solution because there's very few solutions out there for people who have trauma. Because you try and get a therapist, no chance.
People will come to me and they say, okay, you've dealt with it. You've got sober. I don't know whether I've got a drink problem. I don't know whether I'm an alcoholic, whatever. I think you said it at the start. Even when I got sober and I stopped drinking, it took me a while to acknowledge I was an alcoholic. I wasn't convinced. I remember sitting looking at you thinking, well, I'm not as bad as Tom, whatever Tom was. So, but I was. I will say to people, how do you now say how I judge myself as an alcoholic was I would walk into a pub. I never drank at home, but I used to go in pubs. I would walk into a pub and pretty much I can still clearly remember I was walking into that pub for half an hour. The moment I had one drink, that was it. All bets were off, like you say.
Yeah.
So I would say, I can't tell anybody whether they're an alcoholic or not. But I would always say, you've got to answer yourself the honest question is that if you have one drink, do you have then any control of how many it is? And if there's any point throughout the week where you've not got that control, I'd say there's a drink problem.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah. Family, financial, physical. Those are three things you'd look at in your life. How is alcohol impacting your family? Are you making arrangements with your partner to go out for a meal and having to go to the pub before you go out for the meal? Yeah, having to have a couple of little sneaky whiskies or sneaky halves before you go out for your meal. Physically, how are you feeling? Are you waking up in the morning with a headache? You're waking up feeling grotty. Do you feel like you could do with a drink first thing in the morning? Not everyone needs that. I was never a first thing in the morning drinker.
No,
I was a 5 o'clock drinker, but I felt rough all day.
But I was never a morning drinker.
No.
But after 10, 20 minutes, half an hour of getting over, I feel like shit. I used to get up and feel like shit. But probably by the time I've got up and got out of bed, what horrifies me now is by the time I'm leaving the shower, I'm already thinking
about the drink.
How can I get to a meeting near the pub?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's planning.
It's
planning
within
your day.
But every day was planned around not drinking vodka in the shower. It was what fictitious or real meeting could I create near a pub at between 12 and 2 o'clock? Because then I'm off and running.
Yeah. And it's family and physical and financial. How much impact's having on you financially? Because alcohol is an expensive hobby.
It is now.
It is a very expensive hobby, and it can ruin people. So it's about understanding. So those three things, I always say to somebody, all right, well, let's look at your family life. What's it like? Is it causing any problems at home? Physically, how are you looking? Are you firing on all cylinders? Is work a problem? Are you struggling at work? Are you still able to do your job? And financially, let's have a look at those three. And there's any one of those three is affected by alcohol, it doesn't mean you're an alcoholic. It just means you might need to look at where you're at with your drinking. You might need to say, do you know what? Whereabouts on the alcohol spectrum am I? You know, where am I? Am I a non-drinker, social drinker, heavy drinker? Have I crossed over from being a social drinker to being a heavy drinker? Have I somehow along the line used alcohol as a solution to my problems? And remember, that's what most alcoholics find it is. It's a solution. It can be a solution for confidence. It can be a solution for trauma. It can be a solution for being able to just function at your job. It can be a solution for so much in your life. What have you made it a solution? Is it solutions for grief? It's a solution for all sorts of different things. You can use it as an excuse for your violent temper. It's a perfect solution for a lot of people. It doesn't mean you're an alcoholic. It means you found a solution. For me, it took me until I was 50 before I finally dealt with the reasons why I was drinking in the first place. It took me to the age of 50 to manage to get that, Cliff. 50 years of age, after 17 years of sobriety, I finally finished with my therapist, having had 18 months of therapy, and could quite honestly say with my hand on my heart, I was back to 95% of who Tom is.
You're now sober.
Mm.
Are you happy?
I am now. I am now. The last 5 years have been horrific. Horrific. So, yeah, I am now. Therapy's been great for me.
Would you have got through those 5 years as a drinker?
No, I'd have been dead.
Yeah.
I'd have been dead, 100%. When my brother died, I'd have been dead.
Because I think when you were talking about that, about those 5 years and sober, you didn't think of drinking. Yeah, people who get sober, it's not all sunshine and flowers,
No.
but it's actually when hard times come sober, it feels hard because there's no way to escape because you're not going to the pub. But then reality, when you just have a quick look back, you go, I don't think I'd have got through this as a drinker. I think this would have been catastrophic.
And I'll reframe it. I've always reframed it. I'm really proud that during those 5 years, I was sober because my mother needed me.
Right.
And had I not been sober, and my daughter needed me, and my sister needed me. So when my brother died, my sister needed me, and I was there for her. And then when my sister died, my mother needed me. And then when my mother died, nobody needed me. So I could get well again.
And I think we could say that as two blokes who, you know, when people needed you when you were drunk, like I was, you didn't care, did you?
No.
I didn't. And that's shame.
Yeah.
I'm not proud of that,
No.
but it's fact. And I don't say that for dramatic return. I say that because it's reality.
100%. Yeah. You're able to detach yourself from empathy when you're drunk. Not have empathy because you're so caught up in the pity party.
We've talked some dark stuff there, but hopefully people take some positive out of it because we're both sat here and we're both still alive and
Yeah.
we're both sober. What's the rest of life look like for you, Tom?
For me, like I say, 95% back to where I was, or where I know I can be, thanks to therapy. Big shout out to my therapist, fantastic. That's been game changing. And I encourage anyone to get a good therapist. But for me, it's about continuing the work within this field, continue to support people with alcohol and drug issues, continue to support families so they don't go through what I've been through, and continuing to support the recovery movement. I think sometimes we get lost in the language we use. We get lost in the battles of who's right, who's wrong, what's right, what's wrong. at the end of the day, are you sober and are you happy? And if you are, I want to celebrate that. I want to be marching through Leeds like we do for a gay pride every year as March for Sobriety. I want us to be marching through Leeds and Manchester and Liverpool for one day a year that we can feel normal, that we're all right. We do recover. And I think that's the three words I would say to everyone who's looking at somebody who they love, who's an addict, or is, at the edge of life. We do recover. While there's breath, there's hope. And I think for me, that's the message I want to get out to people. Because if we give up hope, then we might as well all go home.
Tom, thank you. But I'm going to say something that I didn't plan this at the start. I remember back sat at that desk, Yorkshire Post, and then talking to you. And then we both going along our journeys. And I was excited to be able to ring and say, let's get on the podcast. To be able to sit and talk to you and listen to the story, I think you've just helped me on my journey even further there. I didn't think I'd feel like I do right now.
Good stuff.
And that's and that was another step for me. And I don't know, I'm going to have to go away tonight and really think about that and not get too emotional now, because I could get really emotional here. I don't know what that is. And that is that the Harley Davidson guy? Because, I've had, like you, last 12 months have been quite tough, a lot to deal with. And and I only said to myself yesterday, the day before, I nearly swore then, well, I did swear then, this is tough, this, when does this start getting easier? There's just a few things out. And then you rock up and you tell your story and we just reminisce there. And I just think, I remember being sat at that desk feeling like I did, full of shame, carnage around me, and where I am now and being able to talk to you.
No problem at all, Cliff. Can I just finish one bit just to reply to that? I was in Pennsylvania just towards the end of the run and running up the Appalachian Mountains, and my head was down, and you've got like a meter square of tarmac in front of you. And I remember what a sports psychologist said to me a while back. He said, "Look up, Tom." So I looked up and I looked behind me, and for as far as the eye could see, looking west, I had run. And sometimes we forget to look back and see how far we've come. And for me, that image of being on the Appalachian Mountains, looking back across America, I was almost all the way across, and I was still feeling down on myself. I'd run as far as I'd across the continent. Don't forget to look back and remember how far we've come. Look up, look back, and be proud of everything we've done.
And even everything I teach and talk about, I think teachers are often the worst people to actually do it themselves, aren't they? Yeah. But maybe there's a message. Maybe you've rocked up today just to remind me of...
Always the way.
It's been more than a pleasure, Tom. Thank you very much indeed. All the best.
Appreciate it, Cliff. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you for listening to the Magical Mindset Podcast. Please subscribe, leave a review, share around your network. I'm Cliff Sewell. See you next time.